was having nightmares because I was playing that game. I was playing it by myself.
How many pineapples would you like? Just one, please.
It's okay, I'm here now. How are you feeling?
A little better, thanks for coming.
What are you planning to do now?
We're heading to the market to sell these crops.
This is hard work, but the pineapples are beautiful this year.
He thinks the material is strong enough for the building.
We need to make a decision soon about the offer.
I know, but I'm still not sure it's the right move for us.
The day began quietly for Han, a small child with innocent eyes and a head full of soft hair, sitting at the worn wooden table in their humble home. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a golden glow over the steaming bowl of noodles in front of him. His father, still wearing the faint smell of sweat and dust from yesterday's work, bent down with a gentle smile, urging him to eat. "Eat up, Han, my child," he said softly, lifting strands of noodles with his chopsticks and blowing on them to cool the steam before placing them into Han's small bowl. Grandma wasn't home. She had been away for a day or two, and Han's father mentioned she might be busy somewhere in the village. He promised his boy that when she returned, she'd surely bring something delicious. For now, they'd eat together, simple but warm. Han slurped the noodles happily, nodding when his father asked if they were tasty, the broth warming his little belly. Outside, the air was still cool, the streets calm except for the occasional hum of a passing motorbike. Neither of them knew that this quiet morning was about to shatter. A short distance away, two uniformed officers were making their way toward the small house. They spoke in low voices, confirming the address, their expressions tight and serious. "It's this one of them said. "All right, stay calm. If he's home, we move in quickly. We've got the warrant and the weapon ready." They believed they were approaching a dangerous suspect, someone linked to illegal activity. They didn't yet realize the man they were after was simply a father, caring for his young child. Inside, Han's father laughed as he fed his son, unaware of the danger approaching. "Are you full? Do you want to go for a walk later?" he asked, ruffling Han's hair. Han nodded, his mouth full. A few minutes later, the father carried Han outside, deciding to enjoy a short stroll before cleaning up the kitchen. The street outside was lined with uneven paving stones, and Han's small hand clutched his father's finger as they walked. That was when it happened. "Police, stand still!" The voice was sharp, commanding, and full of authority. In an instant, two officers appeared from the corner, one of them drawing near with his hand resting on his holstered gun. Han's father froze, confused. "I'm just taking my child for a walk," he said quickly, holding Han close. But the officers didn't slow. "You're under arrest," one declared, "for illegal possession and detainment." "What?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "This is my child." His grip tightened around Han, instinctively pulling him away from the strangers. The boy's eyes widened, frightened as the officers closed in. "Please, there's been a mistake." But they didn't listen. One officer reached for Han, the other gripping the father's arm and trying to twist it behind his back. Han began to cry, reaching for his father's neck. "Papa!" "Don't worry, Han! It's going to be okay!" the father shouted, even as his balance was broken and his knees hit the ground. Please, this is my son. I haven't done anything wrong. The commotion drew the attention of a woman nearby, Han's mother, or perhaps another close family member, who came rushing out, panic in her eyes. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The officers told her to stand back, explaining in cold, clipped tones that they had orders to bring the man in. Han's mother stepped forward, ignoring their warning, trying to reach for her child. "No, he's the boy's father," she cried. One of the officers hesitated, but the other stayed firm. "Ma'am, everything will be fine. The child is safe." They pulled the father to his feet, cuffing him, and began leading him toward the waiting vehicle. "Papa!" Han screamed, trying to reach for him. The mother grabbed Han, holding him close, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay, don't cry." But her own voice shook, betraying her fear. The father looked back one last time before being pushed into the back of the police car. His eyes met Han's, filled with pain and confusion. "I'll be back, my boy," he called. But the car door slammed shut before he could say more. As the vehicle drove away, the street fell silent except for the fading echo of Han's cries. The mother stood frozen, clutching her son, her mind racing with questions. What just happened? Why did they take him? Could it be some horrible misunderstanding? A neighbor stepped out, asking what was going on, but she had no answers. Her only focus was keeping Han calm, his small body trembling in her arms. Later, she was told not to worry, that the child was safe, that everything would be resolved soon. But the uncertainty lingered like a storm cloud. That night, the house felt emptier without the father's presence. Han kept asking when he'd come back, and each time the mother could only give the same answer: soon. Life had to go on, but the shadow of that day's events hung over them. The next morning, she turned her attention to caring for her newborn, Han's younger sibling, still in the hospital. Her days became a careful routine of expressing milk, storing it in carefully labeled bags, and making sure the baby had enough nourishment. Her husband, whether the same man or another family member, prepared breakfast for her, insisting she eat more chicken to produce better, richer milk. She smiled faintly, grateful for the care, even as her thoughts kept drifting back to that morning's arrest. After breakfast, she stored the fresh milk in the fridge. There were 19 bags now, enough for a week. She told her husband about her plan for the day, only for him to inform her that he'd be leaving for Cambodia on a short business trip, 3 to 4 days at most. He gave her strict instructions: lock the doors at night and never open for strangers. She promised she would. When he left, she turned her attention back to Han, who was playing with a bright red ball in the living room. The boy's laughter filled the house, lifting the heaviness in her heart, even for a moment. In the afternoon, Han's grandmother came to visit, bringing 2 live chickens as a gift. They sat down together, sharing water and stories. But soon, the conversation turned to troubling news. An outbreak had killed most of the chickens back at the grandmother's place. She suspected the source was contaminated stream water, tainted by dead chickens discarded upstream. The mother listened with concern, agreeing that they might need to build a proper chicken coop to prevent future losses. The talk shifted to the baby's health and feeding. The grandmother approved of the breast pump method, though she worried about the mother's diet. "Eat well," she urged. "The baby needs strong milk." That evening, while the grandmother watched Han, the mother went out to the pineapple fields. The scent of ripe fruit filled the air as she walked between the rows, her hands brushing against the spiky leaves. She found several golden yellow pineapples, their sweetness confirmed by a taste test that made her smile. Soon, customers began arriving to buy. She weighed each pineapple carefully, 3.8 kilos for one batch, 4 kilos for another, accepting cash and exchanging friendly words. Some fruit was bruised, some overly ripe, but most were perfect. As the sun dipped low, she returned home, her arms laden with the day's earnings. In the days that followed, she split her time between the hospital and home. At the hospital, the newborn thrived, gaining weight from 1.6 kilos at birth to a healthy 2.5 kilos. The doctor even said they might be able to take the baby home tomorrow, though vaccinations were still needed. Her husband, after delivering the good news, mentioned he'd have to return home for work after the vaccinations. She understood, though she wished he could stay longer. That night, as she sat by the baby's side, feeding them warm milk from a bottle, she felt a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. Life was not easy, full of sudden disruptions and quiet worries. But it was still life, and it was still theirs to live. Somewhere, she believed, Han's father was explaining himself, clearing his name. And someday soon, he'd walk back through their door, scoop Han up in his arms, and laugh again, as if that terrible morning had never happened. But until that day came, she would keep moving forward, one careful step at a time. The night after the doctor's words felt heavier than usual, not because of bad news, but because of the weight of expectation. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the soft amber glow of a bedside lamp. Outside the small window, raindrops began to streak the glass, blurring the distant city lights into a soft watercolor haze. She sat in the chair beside the crib, one hand gently rocking it while the other held the warm bottle of milk she had just expressed. The baby's tiny breaths came in soft, rhythmic sighs, each one reminding her of how fragile and precious life could be. Her mind kept wandering back to Han and the empty space left by his father. She tried not to let worry take root, telling herself again and again that the misunderstanding would be resolved, that he would walk through the door soon. But in the quiet, the questions returned. What if the officers weren't wrong? What if this wasn't a misunderstanding? No, she shook her head, pushing the thought away. She knew the man she married. He was no criminal. Morning came with a thin layer of mist hanging over the streets. She woke before the baby, quietly preparing her things, folding the small clothes she had washed the night before, placing them neatly into a bag. If the doctor was right, today might be the day they could finally go home together. She dressed the baby carefully, humming softly to keep them calm. And when Han's grandmother called to check in, she tried to sound cheerful, telling her they would be home soon. By late morning, her husband arrived, carrying a simple meal for her: rice, boiled vegetables, and a small dish of stewed chicken. He insisted she eat it all, saying it would keep her strong for the baby. She smiled faintly, not telling him how her stomach had been in knots since sunrise. The doctor says the baby's weight is stable now, he said between bites of his own lunch. This afternoon, we'll take them for vaccinations, and then we might be able to go home tomorrow. She nodded, her heart lifting just slightly at the thought of sleeping in her own bed, with both children close. The afternoon passed in a blur. The vaccination room smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the sharp cry of another baby echoed down the hall as they waited their turn. When it was their baby's turn, she held them close, whispering reassurance, feeling their tiny bodies stiffen at the quick prick of the needle. The cry came high and sharp, but only for a moment before she soothed them against her shoulder. Back in the room, she rocked them until their breathing slowed again. "I'll have to head back home after this," her husband told her quietly, almost apologetically. "There's work that can't wait, but I'll make sure everything's ready for tomorrow. I'll send the driver to pick you up in the morning." She wanted to ask him to stay, even just one more night, but she knew the business couldn't run itself. Instead, she nodded, helping him gather his things. Before leaving, he kissed her forehead and leaned down to brush a kiss against the baby's soft hair. "Stay strong," he whispered. After he left, the room felt emptier. She sat by the crib, her thoughts turning again to the scene she had witnessed with Han's father. The shouts, the confusion, Han's terrified cries. That was a wound time hadn't healed yet. She didn't want Han to think his father had abandoned him. When she closed her eyes, she could still hear the police officer's voice, cold and certain. "You're under arrest." It didn't matter how many times she told herself it was a mistake. The memory lingered like a splinter under her skin. Evening came, and the nurses moved quietly through the halls, checking on the patients. She expressed more milk, the repetitive hum of the pump filling the room. Each drop felt like a promise that she was doing everything she could to keep her children safe and nourished. After storing the milk in the small refrigerator, she returned to the baby, lifting them gently from the crib. "You've been so strong," she whispered, tracing a fingertip along their tiny hand. "Tomorrow, we go home." That night, sleep came in fragments. She woke several times to the sound of the baby stirring, feeding them in the dim light before laying them back down. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and damp. In the morning, just after sunrise, her phone buzzed. A message from her husband confirming that the driver was on his way. She dressed quickly, packing the last of her things, wrapping the baby in a soft blanket. The driver arrived with a polite smile, helping carry the bags to the car. As they drove, she watched the city pass by, the familiar streets bringing a sense of comfort. Home was waiting. When they arrived, Han was the first to greet them, running toward the car with a wide grin, the red ball from the other day clutched in his hand. "Mama!" he shouted. She stepped out, holding the baby close, and knelt to hug Han tightly with her free arm. His warmth against her chest made her eyes sting. Inside, the house smelled faintly of chicken soup. Han's grandmother was there, bustling in the kitchen, smiling warmly as they came in. The reunion was sweet, but the absence of Han's father was still a silent shadow in the room. They didn't speak of it directly, but it was there in the way the grandmother glanced toward the door, as if expecting him to walk in at any moment. Over the next few days, life found a slow rhythm. Mornings were filled with feeding the baby, preparing breakfast, and tending to the small chores around the house. Han played in the yard, his laughter a constant reminder of resilience. In the afternoons, the grandmother would sometimes visit, bringing small gifts, fresh eggs, a bundle of herbs, once even a basket of ripe mangoes. One afternoon, the conversation turned again to the chickens. "It's a shame," the grandmother sighed. "The coop is nearly empty now. We'll have to start over." They talked about building a proper enclosure, keeping the birds away from the contaminated stream. It was a small problem in the grand scheme of things, but it felt good to discuss something tangible, something they could fix. And yet every quiet moment brought her thoughts back to the unresolved, where Han's father was, and when he would return. At night, when the house was still, she would sit by the window, the baby asleep in the crib. Han tucked into his bed and stare out into the darkness. Somewhere out there, she hoped, the man she loved was thinking of them, missing them just as much. She imagined the moment he would come back. Han running to him, the baby cradled in his arms, the house finally whole again. Until then, she told herself she would be both mother and father, protector and comforter, strong enough for all of them. The days stretched on, each one a step forward, each one carrying the hope that tomorrow might be the day the shadow lifted. And through it all, she held on to one truth. No matter how much was taken from them, love, quiet, steady, and unyielding, was something no one could arrest. The first week back home blurred into a rhythm of feeding, changing, cooking, and keeping the household together. But beneath that fragile routine was an undercurrent of unease that refused to fade. Each morning she would wake to the soft cooing of the baby and Han's cheerful chatter. And for a few minutes, everything would feel normal. Yet the moment she glanced toward the front door, the hollow ache would return. The man who should have been there to share the mornings, to drink tea with her on the porch before the sun climbed too high, was still gone. The police had said little after that day, only that there was an investigation, that they would keep her informed. But days had passed with no phone call, no update, just silence. She tried to focus on the tasks at hand, sterilizing bottles, preparing warm soup for lunch, keeping Han entertained with games in the yard. The baby was growing stronger, gaining weight, responding to her voice with tiny smiles that lit up her heart. But even those moments of joy were tinged with worry. She could see it in Han too. How he sometimes paused mid-play to glance at the road as if expecting his father's motorbike to appear. One afternoon, while hanging laundry in the backyard, she heard voices out front. Han's grandmother had come again, this time carrying a small basket of vegetables and a few fresh eggs. They sat at the kitchen table, shelling beans, and inevitably the conversation turned to the missing father. "I went to ask around," the grandmother said in a low voice, "but no one will tell me anything. It's like the whole matter is locked up tight." She frowned, her hands still working the beans. "We'll have to be patient, but I know him. He wouldn't just disappear like this unless something was wrong." Patience, she thought, was a cruel demand when each hour without answers felt like a lifetime. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat alone in the living room, the only light coming from a small lamp in the corner. She picked up her phone and scrolled through old photos. Han laughing in the park, the baby's tiny hand curled around his father's finger, a family dinner at the old wooden table. The images felt like relics from another life. The next day brought rain. Heavy drops drummed against the tin roof, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth. She kept the children inside, playing with building blocks on the floor. In the afternoon, a knock at the door startled her. It wasn't the firm rap of an official, but a hesitant, almost apologetic knock. She opened the door to find a young man she recognized from the market, his clothes damp from the rain. I don't know if I should be here," he began, glancing over his shoulder. "But I saw something the day they took him. I thought you should know." Her heart began to pound. She led him inside, offering him a towel and a seat. He spoke quickly, in a hushed tone, telling her how he had been across the street when the police arrived, how he had seen them argue briefly with her husband before forcing him into the car. But what struck her most was what he said next. There had been another man standing a little way off, watching the whole thing. She didn't know the name, but the market boy described him as tall, wearing a dark jacket despite the heat, with a scar running down his cheek. "He left just before they drove off," the boy said, "like he didn't want to be seen with them." A chill spread through her. This was something the police hadn't mentioned, something that didn't fit with the simple explanation of an arrest. She thanked the boy, promising not to mention his name, and closed the door. For the rest of the day, she could barely focus. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, she sat at the table with a piece of paper, writing down everything she could remember from that day. Every small detail, the time, the weather, the expressions on the officers' faces. She added the market boy's description, committing it to memory. The following days became a delicate balance between caring for the children and quietly searching for information. She went to the market more often, listening for gossip, asking casual questions about the scarred man. Most people claimed not to know, but a few exchanged quick glances before changing the subject. It was enough to tell her that the man was real and that people were afraid to speak about him. Meanwhile, life in the household continued. Han's grandmother helped tend the garden. They harvested more pineapples, and Han learned to roll a ball gently toward the baby's feet to make them laugh. She clung to these small joys, knowing they were the threads holding her together. One evening, while feeding the baby, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you want answers, come alone to the old bridge at midnight. Bring no one." Her breath caught. She stared at the screen, torn between fear and hope. It could be a trap, or it could be the break she needed. She didn't reply right away, instead spending the next hours pacing the house, debating with herself. When midnight came, the house was silent, the children sleeping peacefully. She slipped out, locking the door behind her, and walked through the cool night air toward the bridge. The street lamps cast long, thin shadows, and the sound of her footsteps echoed on the empty road. At the bridge, a figure stepped out from the darkness. It was the scarred man. Up close, his presence was even more unsettling. He studied her for a moment before speaking. "You're looking for him," he said. "I can tell you where he is, but it will cost you." His voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was a weight behind his words. She asked why he was taken, what he had done, but the man only shook his head. "Not here. Too many years, even in the dark." He handed her a folded slip of paper, then turned and walked away before she could ask more. Back home, she unfolded it. Inside was a single line of text, an address in a part of town she hadn't visited in years. She didn't sleep at all that night, her mind racing with possibilities. In the morning, she told Han's grandmother she had errands to run and set out for the address. It turned out to be a rundown warehouse, its metal doors rusted and streaked with grime. She lingered across the street watching until a familiar figure emerged. It was her husband. He looked tired, thinner than before, but unharmed. He was speaking to someone just inside the doorway before disappearing back inside. She wanted to run to him, to call out his name, but instinct told her it wasn't safe. Instead, she left quickly, her heart pounding, knowing now that he was alive and that he wasn't simply in police custody. Over the next days, she began to plan. She would need to find out who controlled the warehouse, what their connection was to the scarred man, and why her husband was being held there. She moved carefully, asking questions in ways that wouldn't draw suspicion, all while maintaining the appearance of a normal life at home. But the knowledge that he was so close, yet so far, was almost unbearable. Every night after the children were asleep, she would stand at the window, staring in the direction of that warehouse, whispering into the dark, "Hold on, I'm coming for you."